Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Late on Saturday evening, my guest posted on her party's Facebook an account of her meetings with victims of sexual assault in Manipur. It's chilling, harrowing, and deeply disturbing. But there is a central message that comes across. The victims want what's happened to them known because they believe it's an essential first step to getting justice, something which for some of them has been delayed and denied for over 100 days. Joining me now to repeat and recount what she was told and what she heard and the impact it had on her is former Rajya Sabha MP and senior Politburo member of the Communist Party Marxist, Brinda Karat. Mrs. Karat, you've just returned from Manipur, where you went as part of a team of the All India Democratic Women's Association, and you met a large number of victims, many of whom were victims of dreadful sexual assaults. They asked you to tell people in India about what happened to them. Before we speak about some of the individual people you met, am I right in saying they want their stories known because this is a first step towards getting the justice that is not just delayed, but in many cases it's been denied to them for over 100 days?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Karan. And the reason I am speaking out is because they have asked us to. The women's organizations representatives we met, who are present, unable to tell their own experiences, they cannot speak either because there is no internet. It's very, very difficult there to communicate. And right now, there is such a deep divide in Manipur that I think the processes of justice are being subverted because of that divide. So there's also a feeling of despair among women, specifically among the victims, and of course, the organizations who are trying to bring justice to them.
Now, you met the young girl who was one of the victims of that horrifying viral video, and it has shaken the country when it first emerged at the end of last month. What did this girl say to you?
The girl herself is deeply traumatized and finds it very, very difficult to speak. And as women activists who worked so hard with victims of rape, we hate to ask rape victims to relive the terror and the atrocity. Her mother and the older rape victim were able to speak. And their story, of course, is well known. The facts are well known. I don't think it's required for me to repeat all those facts to your viewers. I think they know the facts. But what her own experience is, after this, she was dragged out. They rushed to a jeep there, a police jeep. And the driver of the Jeep and the other policeman there said, "We don't have the keys to the car, so we cannot drive you to safety." And they literally handed over the women to the mob. The girl's brother, I think he's just about 16 or 17, he just ran and clutched hold of his sister and begged and pleaded that he was just clinging on to her. And they tore him away from her and brutally killed him in front of her eyes. They killed her father who rushed there in front of her. And then, they stripped her and gang raped her. But when she ultimately got to safety, she could not speak to her mother. She couldn't speak to anybody about what happened to her because her mother was in such deep grief, dealing with the loss of her son and her husband. So this young woman, barely 20 or 21, she had to deal with that grief, the trauma, the barbaric incident in humanity which she faced completely on her own. And then after that, this video becomes viral. And the whole world knows about it. Her mother sees it. I mean, it's something which every woman knows. It's a violation of every woman's body when that video went viral. And she felt that too. And the worst thing is, what she said, what her mother said, what the older woman said, that if we felt that there was justice, if we felt that those who perpetrated this horror on us, they are going to be punished. Well, there is some feeling of closure and a feeling of solidarity that people are with us, the government is with us. But that's not happening. And therefore, the injustice is a further blow to them, their dignity, their emotions.
What is her condition today? She must be under unbelievable mental stress, and she must be suffering emotionally in an almost indescribable way.
Yes, that's true. That's true. The older woman said that if we get justice, at least we can believe that no other woman will ever face what we face. So basically right now, Karan, I'm really not in a position to describe how a rape victim or somebody whose son has been, brother has been dragged away. I'm not really, I don't think I should even try and describe what the girl may be feeling. I mean, that's not what I'm here for. What I'm here for is to say, we want justice, they want justice. And what is the government doing? The chief minister has not even bothered, even once, to make an attempt to see them. The prime minister, the home minister, nothing. Every statement they have made is another barb at the victims, another arrow at their heart.
In the video you put up on your party's Facebook, you also say you met a 15-year-old girl who was raped by 4 militant men in uniform and then thrown down a cliff. Miraculously, she did not die, she survived. But what sort of condition is this child in? She's 15.
She's a 15-year-old child. She was abducted. And then I've seen the FIR too. And there the FIR says that some women were also involved in handing her over to the militants. And they drove her away in a car to this place where there was a cliff. And she was raped there. And the FIR says that she slipped and fell. but her own experiences that she was pushed and she was very, very badly injured. They left her for dead. And then she was found later, and the police came and rescued her, and she was taken to the hospital. She suffered very, very deep injuries. This happened not on the 3rd or 4th of May, but on the 15th of May. So that means, this is very important because it means from the 3rd to the 4th, where the government is saying these are spontaneous things which we were not prepared for, this happened on the 15th of May, when surely any government would have had the situation under control. So on the 15th of May, this young girl is abducted, gang raped, thrown down a cliff, left for dead, and she miraculously escapes. And nobody has reached out to her from the state government.
You said that, in fact, a group of women surrounded her and, in a sense, handed her over to the militants who raped her.
That is what the FIR also states.
Are those the Mira Paibi?
I'm not sure. I don't think any names have been given, but certainly they were of the other community. And all the victims whom I met belong to the Kuki Zome community.
You know, when I heard your video on Saturday night, when you sent it to me, I was particularly shaken about this 15-year-old girl who is a child. Her whole life lies ahead of her. Will she be able to put this behind her? Or is this likely to haunt her right through her life?
See, this terrible atrocity which has happened to her, it is linked to her own identity. It's every rape victim, and every woman knows who's a rape victim. It takes a great deal of support, infrastructural support, social support to get over the violation of your body. That's why you say from a victim to a survivor. But here it is something deeper than that. They deeply believe that what has happened to them is because of their identity. And therefore, it is linked to a wider issue. And the basic question is, at such a time where it's literally like being in a war zone, it's being like a victim of a crime connected with a war. That is what the feeling is. And this is a feeling I found on both sides. It's not just one side, on both sides, this is the feeling. And therefore, the processes of justice, which do bring some closure, when you feel that you are getting tremendous support, when you feel that there are people who care for you, when you feel your government, your society is there for you, here there is nothing like that. Here you are alone, supported by your community, most definitely. They do have the support of their community. But in a situation where justice depends on so much else, on the political will to bring justice, and there's a total absence of political will to bring justice to these women of sexual assault because of their identity. So it's all, it's a very complicated issue there for these women to recover.
You also, as you recount in that video, met the parents of two girls who worked in a car wash in Imphal. They were gang raped and they were killed. What did the parents say? Has anyone been able to reach out to them? Have they been able to file a case? Has the police been attentive? What did the parents say about the response they've got? Because they've lost their children.
They are totally in despair. The mother of Olivia and the father of Florence, they said that what they felt most deeply hurt about was that in that situation, their colleagues who were there in the garage and the owner of the garage, who was a paternal figure for Olivia, according to the mother, he had promised that he would take them to safety. But she feels that he did not do so when he did have the capacity and the wherewithal to do so. Now, I can't comment on that But the feeling is not just a feeling that I have lost my daughter to such brutality, but also the fact that those whom she trusted betrayed her. So that feeling of betrayal is very, very strong. And I think that adds so many layers to one's grief and sadness, because then you begin to believe that there were people who could have saved her, who knew her, who cared for her in the past. But this war conflict, which is there, either prevented them from doing so or they did not do so. I can't speak about that, but I can only tell you that feeling of betrayal among both the mother and the father. And these two girls were best friends, Karan. The elder one, Florence, she just started a beauty parlor in Imphal, and she was just earning money in the car wash just to have a little extra income to put into her beauty parlor. And Olivia was going to leave the car wash and go and join her best friend. And you know, it's so terribly sad. It's so tragic.
And the worst part is the parents are left with this belief that their children could have been saved if the assurance given was fulfilled, but it wasn't. That's a terrible thing for parents to have to live with.
It is absolutely, as I said, that feeling that they were betrayed. I think that is a huge burden on the minds of their parents.
Now, Mrs. Karat, the three cases in your video and the three cases we've discussed today are all kooky. Did you meet any Meitei victims of gang rape or of brutal killings by the kooky?
Quite frankly, Karen is a woman who's as an activist in the women's movement. I find it so abhorrent that we have to talk in terms of a woman raped here or a woman raped there, and which community did she belong to, and so on. But it's true that in a conflict like this, we have to see that, you know, who has been involved and who are the people and what has driven them to it. So it's very clear that what has driven them to it is this huge divide which has been created. Among the Meitei women too whom I met, there is a huge fear that anytime, any day they can be attacked. This is a fear that many ordinary Meitei women have, particularly those living in the border areas. And we did meet a mother who lives quite close to that area. Just last week, a bomb fell on her house and killed her young son of just 8 or 10 years. I mean, it was a terrible tragedy. They were at home. The house was hit by a bomb and the boy was killed. So a grieving mother. We heard that an FIR had been lodged in Vishnupur Thana of a very brutal, terrible rape of a woman who was a Meitei. And we went immediately to the Thana to try and find out, because I wanted to meet her, but it was not possible to do so. And we were not given the details. But we have heard that such an FIR has been filed. And we have heard that it was a very brutal case.
I can confirm that for you. It's been in the newspapers probably while you were in Manipur, and someone from Manipur has sent me by WhatsApp the FIR. It was filed on the 3rd of May. It was a gang rape of a Meitei woman. I won't go into the details of what happened, although those have also been in the newspapers. And the FIR accuses, in quotations, unknown kooky miscreants. And it was originally filed in Churachandpur and then transferred. But the reason I asked that question, whether you'd met Meitei victims and only kooky victims, is because I've been repeatedly told by Meitei organizations like Kokomi that both in India and abroad, people have a one-sided and distorted picture of what's happened in Manipur. Kokomi spokesmen have fairly vehemently told me that the belief that the kooky are victims and the Meitei are perpetrators is not true. Both sides, Kokomi says, have done horrible things to each other. Both, Kokomi says, are guilty of brutal killings, arson, loot, and gang rape. After your visit, what was your personal impression?
My personal impression is that the government is totally and completely culpable for what happened. On both sides, I can tell you this, Karan, we met so many women. On both sides, this feeling that we have lived in peace, we have lived in harmony. How is it that this has happened? And we have reached a point, almost a point of absolutely no return. How is it? And they have said clearly it is the government. So, and I believe after speaking with them, there is absolutely no doubt about it that this is the culpability of the Biren Singh government. And they have added to it, let me tell you, by their utter callousness, their partisanship, and the kind of statements that the chief minister has given against the Kuki Zomi, the tribals. I feel ashamed that an elected chief minister should make those statements. So, in answer to your question, yes, there was violence. There's no doubt about it. We have seen houses which were burnt, Maite houses which were burnt, particularly in the mixed areas near the so-called border. I have seen people in the most terrible conditions in the relief camps there. So there's no question that there was violence, but it is the minority communities of tribals who have faced, as always minorities do, the worst brunt of violence. There is absolutely no doubt about that in my mind. It's not as though there is no retaliation. It's not as though there is no violence and the other side were completely peaceful. I told you, I've seen the houses burn. But I think it is totally wrong today to try and cover everything up by saying, and it's happening on both sides. It did. At the beginning, it did. But obviously, in any situation, it's the minority who gets the worst of this type of violence, particularly when the state government is so openly partisan.
I take your point entirely. For the sake of the audience, I'll point out that the houses that I think you're referring to were probably in More, very close to the border with Myanmar or Burma. And according to reports in the Hindu newspaper, somewhere between 35 and 50 got burnt down. But the Maite residents of those houses had by then long since left. Also, Sunday's Hindu, on its very front page, has a story about how some 230 or 250 people who are mainly Maite fled for their safety across the border into Burma and are living in tents on the Burmese side and are unable to come back to India, but they left because they were scared of what would happen. That's a story that hasn't come into any other paper or any television channel, but it was there on the front page of the Hindu. And these are clearly Maite people who fled into Burma seeking sanctuary there because they were scared, petrified of what the Kuki would do to them. But let me tell you one thing. Something that's come across very strongly is that the government, and you talked about the culpability of the Biren Singh government, and the police have done nothing to pursue this case. That must rankle with both sides hugely, because to be treated brutally is one thing, but for the government to become indifferent and do nothing about it, not to pursue it, is like rubbing gross amounts of salt into bleeding wounds.
I don't think I can speak for every single person there, but certainly the women whom we met, a large number of them whom we met, definitely holds the government responsible. And they despair really, because nobody can really see what is the future and what is going to be the political solution. I think there is a general feeling that as long as this chief minister remains, this is going to continue. I think the first step towards a political solution now really, because even the camps we met, people are saying, what's the question of relief and so on. Send us home. We want to go home. We want our lives back. We want to be Manipuris as we always were, but we can't because there is no political solution. And without a political solution, we cannot move forward. And there cannot be a political solution as long as somebody who is so clearly partisan and who has been responsible for this remains in office. So this is the kind, and it's, I think, at least for me, because I don't know what their reaction to the parliament speeches were. I was there then, so I didn't hear any of them, Karan. But I can imagine, and what I've read since I've come back, that the kind of speeches which were made talking about the cooperation of Biren Singh and therefore he cannot be removed. I mean, the first question is cooperating with whom? And for what? Cooperating with whom? Is he cooperating with the Constitution of India? No. Is he cooperating with the establishment of peace? No. Is he cooperating with the processes of bringing justice to the victims? No. He doesn't even recognize them. So what is this cooperation? I have no idea. I don't think anybody does.
Were there Maite voices also who feel fed up with Biren Singh and want to see the end of him?
I can't speak on their behalf, but I think certainly there are very strong voices who we met who think that he is a barrier to a political solution.
One or two newspapers, either yesterday or today, have a suggestion, I won't put it stronger than that the reason why the police are unable to pursue these cases more vigorously is because the police instead have been deployed in security and protection duties because of the situation in Manipur. Do you buy that explanation?
The reality is that the situation created, it's a war. And there is absolutely no belief on either side of anyone, any official from the other side. I tell you, Karan, I couldn't believe it until I saw it. It's like the Wagah border. On the main road, there is a huge checkpost on this side, which is manned by, I think it's the CRPF. In the middle is the army. There's a no man's land between two barriers. Nobody can go there. The army is there, and on the other side, it's the Assam Rifles. So there's a border there. Nobody can cross. Do you know, Karan, the only people who can cross either side are the Muslims. Ironically, the only people who are quote unquote safe moving across Manipur are the Muslims. So this kind of division, what your question is about the police not being able to move, and they can't go there and file the FIRs and so on. But there are so many people from that community who can do it, but there's no belief in them. So that is an issue there. And that issue is being deliberately created by this government. And the governor, I must tell you, Karan, I must mention, the lady we met her, she really has opened the gates of her governor's house to everybody who wants to meet her. She has been there personally and met the victims. She has promised them that she would try. She promised them that at least the dead bodies of the young girl's father and brother, she will try and ensure that they are taken there. But when we spoke to her, she said the political situation is such, there's a very limited role that I can play, and I keep giving the messages to the people I have to, but it is up to them to act. So she has tried, unlike the others in the government, she certainly has tried. I must say that.
But you're also saying that despite her best efforts, despite having a word with people who matter, I won't name them, but clearly Chief Secretary, Chief Minister, DGP, she's not being heeded. She's being ignored. She's speaking to people who don't respond.
I think that's the conclusion you can reach from what I have said. And it's very clear that that is so, even though she specifically did not say it. And she also mentioned that it's good that the Supreme Court has taken note of these cases.
She welcomed that.
Yes.
We're coming to the end of this interview. Tell me, if the police and the government have effectively turned their back on victims, whether they are Maite or Kuki, who's looking after them? Is it the church? Is it civil society? Is it women's groups? Or are they just got their families and nothing more?
There are women's organizations, there's the Zuni Mothers Association, there's the Kuki Women's Association, there's Human Rights Association, and the church also in many areas. There's a philanthropic society which is an umbrella organization, and they have set up all the relief camps there. Unlike the mighty areas where the government is giving direct help, in the Kuki areas, I met the deputy commissioner. He's a very young committed officer from Tamil Nadu, and he is doing his best, and the tribals have a lot of faith in him too. But unfortunately, all the supplies have to come via Mizoram because they are not allowed to cross Imphal and come into this area. They are being stopped on the Mighty side. So all the goods have to come via Mizoram, which is 15 hours it takes. So prices are very, very high right now in the whole tribal belt. And it's very difficult. And I was told that people are eating just once a day in many areas in both sides, because there are a large number of unorganized workers who are literally having one meal a day today. So the economy is also deeply, deeply affecting the poorer sections in a very, very drastic way.
I need to correct an impression that I may have incorrectly given earlier when I referred to that Hindu article on Sunday, the front page story that talked of some 230, 250 people having to flee to Burma to seek sanctuary and safety. They aren't all Maite. A large number of them, I can't remember how many, are in fact Tamils who've been living in the More area for a long time, but they too have fled to the Burmese side. I just need to correct the impression that they were all Maite. They are not. Finally, will you, on behalf of these victims, both Kuki and Maite, meet the Minister for Women and Child Development or the Home Minister to demand the justice they are crying out for, and which is either being deliberately delayed or maybe even deliberately denied?
Well, if the organization I went with, the All India Democratic Women's Association, if they feel that it is worthwhile to meet the ministers and raise these issues, certainly I will support that effort. We are going to try and meet the President of India, that much I know.
Mrs. Karat, thank you very much indeed. And thank you in particular for sharing your belief that the governor is doing all that she can, that she's particularly happy that the Supreme Court has taken up the case. But sadly, her words of advice, particularly to those who count, are not being heeded. They may even be deliberately ignored. That is important for people to know, because it does mean that one very important constitutional functionary is concerned, but sadly, it's also possible that she's being stymied. Thank you very much indeed.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.